All right, we have some Kate and Kris.
Here we go.
All right,
Hello.
how you guys doing?
How are you?
Good. We have good attendees, so this is a good thing. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I want to say a special thank you, of course, to all of our panelists here tonight. We'll be introducing ourselves in just a moment. I also want to thank all of you for taking time to be here, meaning here in this cyberspace. I hope that this Zoom is helpful. I know getting everybody into the school is not always easy, but this I hope leaves flexibility for you and your schedule. And then I want to thank our Nutria Parent University and TPA. There's parents who help co-chair the parent programming, and this is one that we heard parents really wanted more information on, and that's just the navigation of students in healthy relationships, especially with our teenagers today, and how some may share a lot of information and some may not share much information. So we hope tonight will be very informative and helpful for you. We're going to begin by introduction, so I'll let Kate go ahead. You can begin.
Great, thank you. So I'm Kate Kalnes. I've been at Nutria for 19 years, and I'm in the Kinetic Wellness Department. And my role here today is really to just talk about how the Kinetic Wellness Department and our curriculum is helping to foster healthy relationships and work on communication. We have a program all through starting freshman year through senior year where we are touching on this topic. So I'll be talking about that throughout the night.
Thanks, Kate. Kris.
Hi, I'm Kris Hummel. I'm a social worker at Nutria, same amount of years as Kate. I think 19 is us. And super grateful to be here. I think it's really important for parents to feel that we're in this with you, that you're not alone, and we look forward to at least imparting some things, but also we hope to learn from you as well. I think from parent to parent, you learn a lot from each other, and sometimes in a room, when it's not a webinar, it's a fear of saying something, of, asking a question, things like that come up for all of us. So if we appreciate putting things in the chat and letting us know what your thoughts are, or if you have tips for other parents that are on here that ask the question in the chat. But I certainly am grateful to have the conversation with you all.
Thanks, Kris. And, when we do these programs, we're so fortunate that we have such wonderful partnerships with the Family Institute. So welcome, Amber. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Przybyla. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm also a board-certified art therapist. And my specialty is working with kids, adolescents, and teens, definitely navigating relationships, building healthy relationships with their parents, school. So I'm really excited to be here with everyone and to engage in the conversation, hear your questions, and share some hopefully helpful information.
All right, well, great. And I should have introduced myself, but I'm Denise Dubrovic. I'm the principal on the Winnetka campus and assistant superintendent. And I'm just thrilled to have everybody joining us this evening. We're going to go ahead and begin. We've got a couple slides. We also just want to make sure that we're taking questions. There were a lot of questions that were submitted in advance. I have those, so I'll be sharing those questions as they come up in the discussion, and also afterwards we'll have time for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just, one of the discussions that we had was talking about, guidelines for healthy communication. And Amber, I think all of you are going to probably join in on this slide. I think these are some of the things to remember when you're having the conversation. So we'll talk about this and then maybe some examples, Amber, if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about these guidelines for healthy communication, I hope these guidelines provide a framework and they can apply to the child-parent relationship or your child's relationship with their peers or friends. So number one being really just being honest, kind, respectful, encouraging, and using non-threatening or hurtful language. So we really want to make sure that we're always coming from a place of kindness and respect and not trying to hurt anyone as best as we can. If that happens, be accountable, apologize, we pivot and we move on. Listening without judgment. So really holding that space that, your teens might do things you don't agree with. And if we can withhold that judgment, that's going to keep them talking and engaging with us Or if you have that teen that's like not really wanting to talk, they might then come to you later if they do need help and support. Also, trying to understand each other's perspectives, I think, is a really big one because, you know, your teen's coming from a different place, different set of experiences than you have. We know the world's a different one than what you grew up in. And so I think the more that we can try to kind of come together or meet in the middle, it's really the best place to foster the healthiest communication.
Amber, can I ask you something on that? Because there was a question that came in about how can parents develop more conversations with kids when they don't share common interests? And I think, you know, the way we went to school, now the way our students are going to school today, there's obviously, you know, differences than our parents to school.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things when we don't have those common interests with our kids is just asking a lot of open-ended questions and being curious. And one example I think about is I work with a lot of athletes. I am not athletic at all. And through curiosity and questions such as like, who is your favorite player? Or tell me like who's in this class, or tell me what you like about this. What interests you about it? And just allowing them to talk at you, then as they're gathering that information from what they're sharing, you can keep asking questions and keeping the conversation going. And you also might kind of surprise yourself and maybe find a point of interest at the same time. So I think curiosity, asking those open-ended questions, and really understanding that even if you don't have the same interest is in your child, by engaging in those conversations, you are helping develop their sense of self and who they want to be as they continue to grow.
I agree
Kris,
with that, and
anything?
trying to find, I just trying to
Okay.
find places where, you know, if you're watching something even, and there may be a little nugget, is just, you know, allowing a chance for them to talk more about it, asking questions, like being curious, like Amber said. I think, you know, sitting there and maybe you're not a rom-com person, but you're watching a rom-com, even though it's not necessarily some kind of movie or show or that they're interested in, I think can just build a bridge. And having those just, you know, I have a family member who's really into different anime and, you know, and different kinds of movies. And so we talk a lot about like, how did you get into that? And what are the things that you really enjoy about that? And they draw. And so, you know, how would you draw this person? What are the colors? And they have specific colors about them. So just being able to think about joining where they're at so that they feel like you're interested, and don't be fake about it, because sometimes kids will see right through that. And sometimes having a time and place to do that. So for example, how many people here probably have used or that kids have talked when they're driving, when you're driving in the car and they're not talking, or you're not face to face and you're just being able to talk in general, or walking the dog, or just finding these moments that can be just little nuggets and go at it, you know, like slow roll it, you know, just don't try to have huge and high expectations of being able to get all that you wanted to get out, but just being curious and knowing when to kind of, you know, navigating while also backing down.
Great. Thank you.
And you know, I think too, kind of talking about like understanding each other's perspectives, or trying to kind of connect with your teen when maybe you don't have the same interest. I think the next thing that kind of falls in line is also respecting those like boundaries. Those can be physical boundaries. They can also be boundaries about topics. I know one thing I see in my work a lot is allowing our teens to say like, I actually don't want to talk about this right now. And realizing like, unless it's a safety concern, sometimes they don't want to talk about it because they need to work through whatever's going on. And so, you know, when our teens are saying no, let's be curious about what the no is, and then understanding that even if we don't always agree with it, as long as, you know, they're healthy, they're safe, we can let them set that boundary, because in the safety of the parent-child relationship, if they're allowed to do that, then that generalizes out into their friendships and other relationships as they transition into adulthood. And then the other piece too is safety in a relationship. So what I mean by that, and what we're talking about, is like being able to say no, or feeling like comfortable to decline. Because if I know we're going to talk about peer pressure, we know peer pressure is a big thing for teens. So really helping them understand that if you don't feel comfortable, telling your friend no, or you cannot say no in any relationship, that's concerning. You should be able to say no within reason, even to you as parents. I'm sure you hear no from your teens a lot. And I just want to let you know that if they're saying no to you, that could be also a cue that they feel safe with you. And then supporting during difficult times is a big one. And then also celebrating each other's successes. And so this can look at like big successes, like doing well on a test or getting great grades at the end of a semester or quarter, but it can also be just acknowledging that your child is putting in effort. That's a success because effort is hard. We all have days where we don't want to do that. And so I think just those little acknowledgments and celebrating the little things that really helps fill up our teens. And when they feel filled up, when they feel supported, they're going to come to the table and have a much more regulated conversation with you. They might feel more comfortable with you, and they might be more honest with you as well. And then I think a big piece of this is how we rupture and repair. So any healthy relationship, we're going to have ruptures or disagreements, explosions, fights. And that's normal and that's healthy. Where it becomes unhealthy is where we explode and then we don't come back together to talk about it. So that's why we have rupture and repair together. So we have a conflict and then we come back together, we talk about it, we acknowledge what both could do different and then what we want to do kind of going forward. So if you're doing that with your teen, even if you have a lot of that rupture, as long as you're coming back together, that is a sign of healthy communication. And to normalize that for teens is gonna, again, when we can do that in the parent-child relationship, it gets generalized out into their friendships, into their relationships with their teachers, coaches, etc.
I think that's a really, just even happened today and made me think about what you're saying, Amber, is a student said, my parent never, ever, ever apologizes. And some of it is very obvious, some of it may be that it's in, just like what Amber is saying, is a partnership. Like, how do we get back to in our relationship together to come back together and figure out what went wrong so that we can do better in the future. And so it's in a way that kids can hear it. I'm saying this as an adult, but in a way that can be breezy and gosh, I always say to parents, own your part and also say, kind of like, ouch, that didn't feel good. Even if you say something that I'm exhausted. We all don't say things the way we want to say things at times, or wish we said things, and being able to go back can be, I will tell you for this particular student, being able to go back to the parent and is going to talk with the parent about it and just say how they feel. Because I always tell kids, just like all of us, you can't take away how you feel. Those feelings are yours to own, but it may be something that, you can ask for future. Like when this comes up again, I felt X, Y, and Z, and this is something that, can we talk about it differently? Kids, I think, I think sometimes we give them tons of credit and sometimes we don't give them enough credit. So I think they're very capable in what I see in my office of being able to, even though there are challenges in parent and child relationship or with peers, that they're able to know how they're experiencing things and being able to think through how this could be different is so important for them and their sense of self and also their identity within a family.
One of the questions that came up too, and I think this is one that, tips for building confidence in teens. To be able to say no, to be able to have those, to feel like they're confident in what they believe, and that they can share that.
Yeah, when I think about building confidence in teens, it's, I think, really helping them through parenting, through conversation, helping them identify their values. Because when we know what our values are, so we know one of maybe your teen's value is treating people how they want to be treated. And so reminding them that, like, when we know what our values are, it's going to be easier to say no. It's going to be easier, and I say easier, it's still going to be hard, but you might have more ease declining something because they then know that they're declining it not because it goes against what they believe in. And why that is so important is when we think about like rates of depression with teenagers, one of the clear ties to that is not aligning with their values, showing up and feeling fake. And so the more that we can help our teens understand who they are, at least in the context of the moment or the year of their life, that is really going to help them go out in the world and advocate for themselves. And also another way to build confidence in them is to give them praise, whether it's praise for achievements or praise for how helpful they are or how thoughtful they are. The more we fill them up with that positivity and genuineness, I think that helps them go out and be a more confident person. And that's even, when I work with my clients, sometimes they'll even call me out and I'm like, you're right. That's great. Like even the ability to even acknowledge your kids' like insight or questions and to really just engage with them in a genuine way and show appreciation for them is also going to build their confidence too.
Yeah,
I-
that meaningful contributions I think is really important. And I also feel that building on things that are easy for you as a parent to do. So some of it can be, I think, they say this with even the littlest kids, is any little way that they can help you out or help somebody else. So like by contributions doesn't have to be necessarily, the recognition or well-achieved accomplishments always in athletics or, they did great in the play. It can be, hey, can you take the garbage out? And then acknowledging, validating, like Amber was saying about the positives, saying, sometimes they say 5 positives to every 1 negative. And in time, being able to build that self-worth, being able to them to hear, and you're modeling that for yourself too. I hear from kids, and I work with a lot of students too that have disordered eating. And one of the things that I'll hear from students is that my mom talks about, and I'm giving a few examples, right? So my mom talks about her body and eating and things like that. And so it puts questions in kids' minds. So any way you can model that for yourself and being able to think about what you're putting out there. And we do it not wanting to hurt anyone or that for your kid to be less. I'm just giving you a number of different things that can come through my door that have a potential that could continue to boost their confidence. And I think also if it's about confidence with relationships, and I don't want to jump ahead, that's something we'll talk a little bit about, the difference between like fitting in and belonging and what's different about that as well.
And we did, I just finished in the freshman KW talking about confidence in making decisions. We just went through, it's called the DECIDE model. We made comic strips about the different steps that you would take to make a decision. And we do this a lot with our students about thinking through what might their decision be in a variety of scenarios. Because I think a lot of times our students don't actually think about it until all of a sudden they're there and they have to make some sort of decision. And they, like Amber said, they haven't maybe thought about their values or what decision making like consequence that might have. And so just what we are doing in the classroom is giving them a lot of practice with making this decision. So maybe when they are in a relationship or they come in contact with anything, they may have kind of thought about what might my decision be at this point to make them more confident in owning their answer.
And I think with all these like healthy guidelines too, like one thing we wanted to take time to highlight is like just some like red flags to share with your teens. And I want to define red flags as like, this is a no-go, like this is never okay. There's no excuses for it. And that is really any form of physical, verbal, or emotional abuse, isolation from others. I feel like isolation, I see a lot in teen dynamics, and manipulation, coercion, repeated boundary violations, and the inability or refusal to be accountable for their actions. And so when we're talking with teens, if they are describing these behaviors as the parent, as the adult in the room, you can kind of I always like to say, like, kind of highlight to them a pattern of behavior. And so how that might look for me when my teens are talking is, you know what, you've told me a couple of times that, you know, your friend keeps putting their hands on you and you're telling them no. And I'm like, how does that feel for you? Like that's, and letting them talk about it, or if they're like, I don't know, it's fine, and they're dismissing it, because I know teens will do that. Just letting them know, like, hey, you know, if you've told someone no, no means no. And if they're going to keep doing that, like, it could be helpful to really think about, you know, do you want to continue to be friends with this person if this is what they're showing you? So I think when we're talking about, you know, your teens are talking about their relationships, reminding them that you don't want to tell them what to do. You want to get them to start thinking about, how does this relationship make me feel? And how would I feel if this pattern of behavior continues? And then offering to them that if that these are hard things to experience, and so you're there for them to support them or help them brainstorm how to tackle it if they've decided that this relationship does need to end because of the red flags.
So Amber, this kind of coincides with the question that we had received about, you know, when parents are trying to talk to their teens about this, there's obviously a level of sensitivity to this from the teenager. So, you know, how you gave some great examples about, you know, what unhealthy relationships are, these patterns of behaviors. Um, the question, you know, how do you work through that without getting shut down or getting, you know, the teen, excuse me, child getting defensive?
Yeah, one of the things I like to do across just the entire, like, any for littles and teens, is I always like to, when we're having these conversations, because they're hard conversations to have, is reminding them about your intention. So always starting out with, like, hey, I want to talk to you about this, and I'm not telling you what to do. But, or not but, and I want to share just some things I'm noticing, and I have some questions. And if they're shutting down, I think giving them a moment, like if they're getting quiet, they're either thinking, they're feeling anxious, they are feeling maybe guilty or ashamed. And so taking that moment to just take a pause. We got time. We have time to have the conversation. You can also ask them if they want to take some time to think about what you're sharing, and then come back to the conversation. Breaks are always allowed, when, as long as there's not any, again, major safety concerns. I think also reminding them that you are asking these questions or having this conversation because you want to help them make decisions that they are going to feel good about. And also, we have different experiences as humans. So I think when we can set that intention of, like, I just want to share what I'm noticing, you take that information in and process it. You're not telling your kid what to do. You're not telling them they've done anything wrong, and you're not then demonizing the friend or the partner, whoever they're hanging out with, whatever the situation is. And just letting them know that, like, we're talking about this because also, these red flags, the nature of these types of red flags and abusive behavior is silence. And so if we don't talk about it, that strengthens the person that's causing harm's ability to continue to cause harm. So talking about it is actually the best way to get out of that relationship, or to come up with other solutions to kind of tackle what's going on. But I also think too, if there's getting, like, defensiveness is coming up, is reminding them that, and I say this repeatedly, I'm not saying you've done anything wrong. I'm just here to try to support you. So constantly repeating the intention of the conversation. And if they're getting really, really stressed out, then take that pause and ask that you guys come back together. Because even when teens aren't answering us, when we ask questions, they're listening and they're thinking, and they might actually just need a little bit of processing time. And that's okay.
I also agree that sometimes in getting to a situation or getting kids to respond, I say this in my office. Well, you know, if your friend was sitting here, what would your friend say? Or had your friend gone through something like this? How did they maybe approach it? Do you think that, and it be a friend that maybe has similar values? Obviously, they're hanging out with them, so hopefully have similar positive values, and being able to think about while you want to get to, and it's your agenda, like, this is not a great situation, whatever happened, and it's not, again, like Amber said, not a safety concern, but it is something that is concerning. And there's some things there that you really want, your child to be able to respond to and react to. I think it's allowing some distance between third person sometimes can help just to generate some ideas, and helping them to think through it. And sometimes kids don't shut down because they know the answer. They know what you value, and you are the number one person that kids listen to. So they know how you feel about it. And I think they know how they feel about it. And just trying to get there is really tough.
Chris, when you say parents are the number one, that's from our data that we've collected from kids, right? Who they get their advice from.
Yep.
It's from parents.
And just for clarity too, the two books, I reviewed some of the two books, and that's exactly what all the data shows. And in both of these books, what our data shows in our YRBS, our youth risk survey that we ask is, I don't think you realize maybe until maybe now that you hold a lot of weight with your kids. We think that they're pulling away and they're saying no and they hate me. They actually love you and need those boundaries and need those things in place for them to be okay. And so I think I'm valuing everything you do and what you're doing to support your kids, and that's really what they need.
Yeah. So Kris, you had you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about these two books?
So we touched on values. The foundational piece as parents to go back to is always like, how does kind of like idea of what moves you towards this value? Like, they value their friends. Okay, well, so what are things that you value about that? How do you, respect those values around your friendships, and also your own expectations, what you expect of that? And those can range from, like, Lisa DeMore talks about hot and cold conditions. And when she was here, and also in her book, she talks about have these conversations in cold conditions, because they're going to be, that's their job, is they're going to be in situations that are going to be challenging, right? They're taking risks. This is their decision making. Their frontal lobe is not fully developed. They're trying things out, and we want them to be safe. So I think number one, you communicating to your kids, not right when you get off of this webinar, because they'll be suspicious, but like, we are a team. We're in this together. We're going to be okay. I'm here with you, but I want to kind of have these conversations before you get in these, for you to know hot conditions, right? So cold conditions are having these conversations around sex, drugs, and, back in my day, rock and roll. So idea of having these conversations ahead of it, having these thoughtful conversations about, we are in this together, and I think I know what you value, kind of going back to some of the things they've already said. So they're saying those things in the past, bringing them up, like, I don't want to, and we're talking about, let's just say, substance use. So tell me about, like, what you would be thinking about in those situations. And also, that if you're in one of those hot conditions, or those, whatever you want to call it, let's have a plan. Let's make sure my number one thing is safety, not about, I want to bust you or catch you, or you're going to be in so much trouble, as you all probably wouldn't do or say. I think it's more about, we're a team, and that I'm concerned about your safety, and I don't want you to be hurt. And that goes to safety, health. I always tell students it's about your health and well-being. And that kind of brings together these conversations. And it could be on a regular basis of different situations. I know St. Patrick's Day, all those different things that may be culmination of having difficult conversations, but managing those through when it's ahead of it. And then also having a plan when there may be, quote, a hot condition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about either one of these books then, Kris?
Yeah, so I think a couple things from them I thought was really helpful to pull out was, Ellen talks about the 5 psychological needs, and she talks about caring connections, which we're just talking about, is really that piece of, if it's not you, then knowing that building in the advisor. I mean, we have such an incredible advisory system. We have incredible resources, but also building in your connections with each other, like parents. You all, not only the kids' number one reason, but you all have great ideas and thoughts about how to have connections as a parent to each other, but also kid to kid. And so caring connections are huge. Knowing how to connect, and we're going to get into social media, but they talk about, we're all, I'm sure, anxious, and we've been, we all enjoy parts of maybe social media, sometimes not. So how we all navigate that are things that kids are navigating too, both positives and challenges. So I'm thinking about, I'm looking at some notes that she said is 5 psychological needs are connection, agency. So they really kids want to be treated with respect. They want to have their own sense of control. I know when I approach a student, if they're really set on something and kind of in a fixed mindset, I really stay and go into that with them and then try to draw them out. Like, what would be another perspective? Or, it sounds like you're really kind of like the idea of being married to something. So I'm trying to kind of for them to help me understand where they're coming from to be able to go somewhere else. And mastery is another one, encouraging to, she talks about encouraging to handle challenges in a way that's developmental. So kind of that idea of risk taking and mastering something and feeling good about it. And of course, their identity, everything is changing at this time of their life, and it could be, changing both with their hair, with different, how they dress, or just also within themselves, who they are, they're trying to figure out, and they're asking themselves questions every day. And the purpose, it's like, what matters, giving them opportunities, what is meaningful purpose in their life, to help them get a sense of direction that goes towards their values. So that's just a few things I thought I'd throw in there. And with all of those different needs, in that are all their experiences, relationships, activities, opportunities that they may have.
That kind of leads us into, I think, several of the next questions here are around social media. I think a couple things, kids today are corresponding, developing relationships through social media. And it's just sort of the way in which they are maintaining their relationships. So maybe can you speak to a little bit about on navigating these relationships over social media, and how we can help support parents, and if that is appropriate, that they're maybe might be meeting somebody online that might not even be local. It might be around, in the area, but not necessarily at the school.
Yeah, I think when I think about social media and connecting with people online, I like to always just establish some like really basic ground rules that I encourage teens to use. So if you are going to have friends online, like making sure that you're not sharing too much, like private information. So your location, your age, where you hang out. You can say, I like to get coffee with my friends without saying I go to Starbucks and I live in this area. And if they're like, because it's teens, they might be like, it's not a big deal. And you could just come from a place of like, I get maybe it's not a big deal, but this is just a best practice, because then over time, if you continue to develop this relationship with someone, then we can talk about when to let them know maybe more personal information. So it's like we don't give them all this private stuff about us up front. I also think asking like this open-ended reflective question of like, so tell me about, what platforms you're using, to connect with people, asking them like, what do you kind of do on there? Because, some groups can be unhealthy or unhelpful, but then I know if you have a teen that loves to play video games, Discord's really popular to talk about those games and share what they're doing or strategize, or find people to play with. And that's very different. So I think when we can be curious about what platforms they're using, what's the function of the platform, and kind of what the general environment is like, that can also help you calm down as a parent, but also you're helping your teen kind of develop these critical thinking skills about the spaces that they're occupying. Because then I think the next kind of third piece I like to talk about with teens is, how do you feel while engaging in those relationships online or engaging in social media? And then how do you feel after? Because if your teen's going, every time I'm on TikTok, I feel like I wasted my day, that's our leverage to talk about TikTok usage. Like, maybe we should cut that down. Or if they love Snapchat and all of a sudden they're like, I hate Snapchat, and we're curious about it, we might find out there was some gossip going on or people were sending photos. And so by being curious, we can also get a better insight into what they're experiencing, which can then make us a more proactive parent as well. And I think also taking this approach doesn't demonize social media or the what it can offer. Again, it's kind of helping them develop those critical thinking skills while they're engaging with these medias. And then also doing your own research. I always say as parents, know the applications that your teens are using.
So, I think so many of our teens are bombarded with this unrealistic, one-sided view of what is out there. That's obviously sometimes curated, that defines for them what they should be, who they should be looking like. What type of information can you help parents with when their child is constantly looking at what somebody else is like online in their lives?
Yeah, I think one of the things I love to talk about with teens is about what is the function of what they're doing. So it's like, I always ask, what is this influencer's intention online? Why are they here? And just to hear that. So it's like, oh, they're just sharing about their life and their vacations. And it's like, okay, that's cool. Who's paying for these vacations? Like, so again, like asking them to talk about it and then asking them more questions helps them. You're very gently guiding them then, because one way or another with teens, when I do this, eventually they get to the point where they're like, you know what? They're always selling something, or they always have a sponsorship. And I'm like, okay, so is that really their life? If like, how real is that if there's always selling something in sponsorships? Do you know anyone that does that? And they're like, oh no. So it kind of helps ground them a little bit. Also just talking about that most social media influencers are going to use filters. Then your teen's going to go, oh, I know about filters. And then now you're kind of connecting their knowledge and reframing, like, yeah, filters can be fine. Sometimes they're fun. Sometimes they're funny on Snapchat. However, even in a TikTok video, someone can literally make themselves skinnier or change their body shape to sell something. And if they go, I don't believe you, they can literally go look it up and see that that's accurate information. So again, sometimes as parents, you might have to do some like research a little bit, but then bringing that to the table so that when your teen tells you you're wrong, or you don't have the full picture, you can either share where you've gotten that information, or you can encourage them to also, I think, look that up. I think that can be really, really helpful, because then you're not just being the parent. You're like, I'm an informed human coming to the table, and I'm trying to help you gain this knowledge so that you can improve your decision-making skills, or just feel more informed about navigating what social media has. And then I also like to talk with teens about, again, mood and social media. So constantly and consistently asking them, like, how do they feel after being on their phone or using a certain app? Again, just to help them connect the dots of their actions, how it impacts their emotional state, and then how that kind of trickles down can be also very helpful.
Yeah.
Just piggy.
So go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
Just quickly, I was thinking as Amber was talking, it's the health skill is analyzing influences that we use at freshman year as well as sophomore year. We do a lot of work around that. Like, how do we analyze these influences, whether it's nutrition or, how to have relationships, alcohol, whatever the influence is, but how are we analyzing it and making sure that it is true factual information? So we have been practicing that with the students as well.
I'll also say I was in a health class for mental health first aid, and they did a continuum. Everyone go to the left or right if, or anything in between. And I feel this way just anecdotally in talking to my students, but it was really clear that the students have received the message that social media can have a negative impact, and that being more discriminating, having the thinking and decision making around, where I didn't feel that way that maybe 10 years ago, or 8 years ago. I feel like we're getting better at, and obviously KW is doing a phenomenal job at just getting kids early on to start to think about. And as parents, the only additional thing that I would share would be, before I would just start asking, like, what's current on social media? And it's interesting. And Kate and I were in a meeting, and there was somebody that's one of our staff members was bringing up, like, wow, they went on YouTube and there was this one influencer, but it then went to another link that was another person with some really, really views that went against their values. And the concern about kind of teasing that out as a parent to say, well, what are you all watching? And maybe you're thinking some of it is sports, and that's great, but finding out what are current influencers, because they change a lot, and being able to be really really on just being curious, I think can help kids then to open up, because they may not think anything is wrong with that, but then you go out and get that information and being able to see, what that impact may be, because it's getting easier. And they're getting more, as influencers are, they're influencing kids in a different way through all of these various links upon links. And that's very different than what it was before, whereas we were like, okay, this is not good. We're seeing images, kids are changing their body. Those things are always the case. And now they're really catching on, is what Kate is really sharing too.
Yeah, and we just announced at our board meeting on Monday evening that the Winnetka campus will continue on with the no cell phone policy during the class period. So our students can have them during the break and in between class, but they have to go in a caddy. We recognize it for kids just having that access to the phone. They did a freshman campus did completely this year. So that helped us on really study and understand the impact, and kids really appreciated not having to deal with their phone. Kate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this has been one of the better freshman classes we've had in a couple of years. And I don't know if it's attributed to the phone, but we, in my classroom, was very clear about it and started from day one and continued. And it has really changed the environment. I wasn't even, necessarily allowing them to have them originally, but it was just like, oh, what's in your lap? You're staring at your lap. Obviously, your phone is in there. Like, they just have ways of constantly hiding and having it there. And so taking that off of me as a teacher, of constantly managing, like, put it away, what do you got? Has really just, the social aspect of the class is better, communication. So it's really made a huge difference in my class.
It's hard as adults, I can imagine, for our students. This next piece here on healthy developmental changes, we had some questions on this. And I think, we understand this, knowing adolescents, about where girls and boys are on the social maturity level. And the sophistication a little bit different in terms of how they nuance relationships. Can you maybe talk a little bit about just what you both understand and know about the vulnerability of teens in themselves, let alone how developmentally it works?
Yeah, I think it can be very helpful to talk with teens about those differences whether it's, I think, especially like in the moment. So if they're talking about a boy they're dating or a guy friend or just the boys in their class, kind of, reminding them that it's not uncommon that girls do mentally mature quicker, and then validating, like, that can be frustrating, and that sometimes, because whether it is as simple as boys and girls being different, or they're an adult and they meet someone who just has less emotional maturity, that we can be frustrated with it, and then we may have to kind of need to pivot how we're interacting with them to meet them at their level. Because if you are a more mature person, and sometimes boys can, maybe you have a son that's very mature and he's talking about how frustrated he is with all his friends. I think when we're noticing that there is some more social maturity, educating that teen on why that is, and then also just letting them know that like it is a skill in life to learn how to navigate people's different levels of maturity or experience or skills, and then talking with them about how to navigate that. So I feel like often with my teen girls, especially, I like to remind them that like, yeah, they're going to do sillier stuff. And I think on average, if anyone knows any different, please correct me, but like girls tend to be 2 years kind of ahead in maturity and development. And so reminding, like I always tell my girls, I'm like, remember, so you're a junior in high school. Remember how you acted as a freshman? That's where our junior boys are at right now. And they're like, oh, okay. So you can even give them like that kind of context a little bit, or if they're describing a behavior that reminds you of their sibling or their cousin, like connect those dots for them, because I think that can help them just look at that relationship a little bit different. And it's not about lowering expectations. It's really about just understanding who they're interacting with, because when we know who we're interacting with, that's actually going to increase our ability to healthily communicate and communicate clearly with them, kind of like knowing our audience. And then at the same time, with boys maybe being less mature, I think it's adjusting our expectations of like, what are they actually capable of? So being polite, being respectful, kind of those core pieces, and then
Yeah.
understanding that they might need a little bit more coaching or a little bit more support to develop those skills. And also highlighting and really praising when they are doing those emotionally mature things. Because the more that we praise, that's going to incentivize them to kind of continue building and growing those skill sets. But Christine, I'm sure you also have like lots to add to this.
And I was wondering, Kate, if you could talk a little bit about how we approach it developmentally in the classrooms.
Well, I was actually just going to share a story. I remember a couple years ago, I was junior and seniors. I had a class of all girls, and we were talking about relationships. And this is a point I want to make about how we're teaching. We teach all of this same information across genders. Like they're all getting that same healthy relationship communication. And so I had this class, and I was talking about some of the red flags and what to look for in a healthy relationship. And I had a girl come up after class, and she was in tears. And she said, I did not realize how terrible I was being to my boyfriend. She's like, I have totally been doing all of these horrible things. I mean, she didn't even like realize it, right? Until we had this open discussion. So I think a lot of times with our students, like it is just even that basic knowledge. And so that's why we start, freshman year, we're starting to talk about how do you just simply communicate, and then we roll that into sophomore year. They're really looking at relationships specifically and those healthy and unhealthy characteristics. We're sharing ideas and stories of what this looks like in a relationship. Because a lot of times if you just say the word respect, well, what does that mean? Like, what does that actually look like in a relationship between two sophomore kids or two junior kids, right? And I think having those conversations has been really eye-opening for a lot of our students. And so we, like I said, we just making sure that we're hitting all the same conversation freshman through senior year, so that it's a constant reminder of, to them of what to look for in themselves, as well as to what they're receiving in a relationship.
Kris, did you have anything to add?
I was going to say is that what I was just thinking about a situation with a student is that not making any assumptions. I think that's really important. I have a student that he is really struggling with a relationship, and he's incredibly sensitive. And our boys, there's documentation, there's books. Kate Kalnes runs a cohort on it about the, kind of that idea of, I think we have in societally assumed a lot of roles, a lot of things. And what we're really seeing is how it gets played out is very different. So we're seeing boys being like the bro world and like everything's cool and kind of cutting people down or being really supportive of their friends and that connectedness. So seeing where that continuum is, even having the friends of your kids over, just to kind of, not in a snoopy way, but kind of hear what's going on and how they're communicating and how they're talking to one another. And for this particular student that I've really been working on, having the confidence and building the confidence and being able to understand that what is happening may not be something that is not feeling great, and acknowledging that and not making any assumptions about that because he may feel differently. It's so just knowing when you come into conversations, don't make assumptions about what they might say. That seems obvious, but for sometimes, even for myself, I have to catch myself of just things that are like unconscious, those biases that may come in.
Thank you. I think a couple other questions we had regarding just developmental is just, senior year, heading off to college. How can you support, a child? They're just trying to figure out if they want to continue a relationship, stop the relationship. So just any advice?
Yeah, I think one timing is important. So I know I often have that conversation with my teens when we start to kind of get those college acceptance letters. Obviously, if it comes up sooner, address it, but just so we balance the piece of not getting too ahead of ourselves and then activating all the defenses going up. And when discussing this, a couple of things I like to offer to teens is this a relationship that is like circumstantial? So were you friends with them because you're in high school together, you have a lot of classes together, you're on the same team together? Or is this a relationship that you've really developed and fostered and really are excited to see where that goes in the future? And that might have to be like a long distance friendship, which is doable. And you can kind of talk about what that might look like, if that's something they're interested in. If they're like, I don't know what I want to do, we can also validate it's okay to not know. And they might not know until that moment arrives where they realize, oh no, I don't want to be this person's friend anymore. Or I do want to continue the relationship. And also letting them know that it is okay and it is normal if the people they were friends with in high school are not the friends that they maintain in college. And even if that feels true while they're in their freshman year of college, that they're in this period of their life where these relationships are going to shift and change because they're figuring out who they are, and those relationships are going to reflect that. And it's okay. Like it may not feel okay, but it is okay if they don't want to continue a friendship. And it's okay and normal if they want to even leverage the fact that they're going to different colleges to end that relationship. That might be a safe way to do that if they don't feel like they could do that like before college. Yeah.
All right, great. So Kate, I thought it'd be great if you've been sharing a little bit about the work that we're doing. I think education is clearly an important piece for our students, is getting that education through our Kinetic Wellness Department. So if you could share a little bit, you have already, but anything else that you'd like to share about the work that you guys are doing to make sure that students are understanding that healthy and unhealthy relationship.
Yeah, so I've been interjecting here and there just as it comes up, but we really do hit on this throughout their career at New Trier. Freshman year, we have 2 programs that we kind of work together with, the Next Gen Men, and it's called the Rape Aggression Defense Curriculum. Both of these curriculums are evidence-based. They're really strong in talking about how do we communicate with each other, how are we allies for each other, how do we show respect, like what does that look like in relationships. So and we started this about I think it was about 4 years ago now. So at this point, up to our seniors, everyone should have gotten this curriculum. Our sophomore year is when we really dive in deeper into relationships, and that's where we really look at healthy, unhealthy red flags. How do we help a friend if we see this happening? How do we communicate to a friend when we might be seeing something going on? So we really talk about, resources in the school. Who can you go to for help? I have had after these conversations, freshman and sophomore year, it is not uncommon to have at least 2, 3, 4 students come up to me after and say, me or my friend or somebody I know is struggling. I see this in my friend. How can I help? Right? How can we do this? And often I come to Kris and I say, okay, Kris, help me out. But yeah, so opening up these conversations in the classroom has really given a way for students to be like, okay, that's the person I can talk to now that I see this, and I can kind of help move that forward. So then as we move into our junior senior year, that's where health drops off. Like we don't have a specific health classroom for the juniors and seniors, but we do have what we call strands. And so our relationship strand is we bring in One Love, and they're an organization that I feel like has been out in the community. People have heard of them. Their whole commitment is to teaching about relationships. And so we have every other year, so that our juniors and seniors will get it at least once as they go through. And we are planning to hopefully have this in the upcoming spring before we leave this year. And it's a video and it's conversations. And why it really works in the KW department is we have a lot of like training and background. So for instance, that at the freshman level, we all have to be certified in RAD in order to teach it. For One Love, we all have to go through like a full day program with One Love and be taught how to have these discussions and how to teach them. So, that's really letting you know that we are hitting on this and all of these, characteristics we're talking about every year that they're in our classes. And honestly, like, even if we're not talking about it explicitly, like these conversations are coming up in the classroom, my juniors and seniors, just as we go through the day. They really are. Like,
I was going to say advisor too, right?
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah, absolutely. An advisor, especially as they get older, you're just like, what's going on? You look a little off, and here's the conversation. It just, opens up into what they saw on social media, or this person, what they're saying. And so it's just a lot of that personal conversation that we're having. And as I've been saying through this, like, we're giving them practice in the classroom, practice on decision making, practice on coming up with their values and what they might want for themselves, and owning their answers. And consent's a big piece. And we've just been really hitting that pretty hard in the last few years. And I do think that we're seeing a change in some of our kids in the conversations we're having. And so, I'm just hopeful that
can you explain that, what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, just the other day, one of our post high school counselors said that for junior theme, she's seeing a ton of people writing about, kind of like what Kris was saying with like the masculine, kind of like moving away from like that toxic masculinity. And she's like, I don't know, all these people are doing papers on this now. And I think, it comes from maybe those conversations we're having. We're trying to break those walls down, break down kind of who you can be as a man, and not have to follow those, those guidelines that we see in society. And we also have, like, when we do reviews for some of the RAD work, and when they're juniors and seniors, we're like, what do you remember? And they remember all of it. It is almost shocking to them as well, because when they're freshmen, they're like, I don't know if I'm gonna remember this. I'm like, I promise you, you're going to, because they get so invested in the work. And so having these conversations is, it's sticking with them.
Yeah.
So incredibly empowering, Kate, because we all hear it too. The kids feel empowered leaving there, and they know what they can say, do, and be going forward. I mean, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I was thinking about, we have a Trev tip line, and the way our kids care for one another is pretty incredible. You see kids reaching out, looking for support for a peer, and doing so in such a compassionate way. And so I certainly would like them to go to an adult, of course, but our kids also know that they have other means. They can go to a coach or a sponsor, their advisor, a teacher, a trusted adult in the building. Of course, the Trev tip is one of those also ways to be anonymous. Several of them aren't anonymous though, and they want to say, hey, can you check back with me? I want to make sure my friends is doing okay. So Well, thank you all for being here tonight. We got through everything that we were planning on getting through, and we got through all the questions here. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being on tonight, and I hope you all have a good evening. Amber, Kate, and Kris, thanks so much. Appreciate all your wisdom and helping us here at New Trier. You guys have a good night, and
Thank
we'll
you.
see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.